Hello, all. Welcome to Exploring Sunday Scriptures for this week. It is Tuesday, July the 8th, and these are the scriptures associated with this coming Sunday, July the 13th. It's all part of our series, which is really centered on this idea of figures of the Bible who are very ordinary, who become extraordinary through their faith, and a way for us through this season of the summer to realize that we may not think that we are capable of a lot, but God knows us better than we know ourselves and knows what's possible in us. And so hopefully coming out of this summer, we'll be ready to embrace the call that God has laid upon us. So that really is the theme for the rest of the summer, including the times when we have other people who will be proclaiming the message to us that they are using this same theme. So different figures, but same theme. Now, some of these figures, as I have said, are more familiar to us, or they become very large figures of the faith. Moses was the first of our series, a very, very large figure in our faith. But others are much, much smaller. Rahab constitutes really only a very little portion of the Bible. That's who we really looked at last week. And now we're going to look at Gideon, which is out of the book of Judges. And though the name might be familiar, maybe because of the Bibles that we find in hotels where the Gideons International leave them, we may not know a lot about the figure from the Bible, Gideon himself. And there's going to be others that are even smaller than Gideon, and yet they do extraordinary and amazing things. So I want to read to you the scriptures that I've chosen of Gideon's story, and then give you a little bit of background into Gideon, a little bit about his story, and him as a figure. This probably won't be as long as some of our time together, which often has 3 scriptures, since we're really only looking at one figure. I also wanted to give you a heads up. I don't think that there will be an online or in-person option for Exploring Sunday Scriptures next week, the 15th, for the scriptures for Sunday, July the 20th, or on Tuesday, July 22nd, the scriptures associated with Sunday, July 27th. That is a time in which I'm going to be away, and so I'm sort of providing myself the opportunity even to be away remotely and to not feel as though there's a need to get all of this done in advance and to pre-schedule these. Maybe I'll be able to get a week of it in, or perhaps not. Some of these scriptures I also don't have everything related to the chapter and verse of Bible being covered on those weeks, so I might not be able to provide it. But I hope you'll afford me a little time away, a little time of renewal, and I'll be back with you then for that first Sunday in August and the scriptures associated with that first Sunday in August, so in late July. So there might be a couple of weeks without Exploring Sunday Scriptures. You can always go back and look at some of the others, and I hope that you'll still participate and tune in for worship and see where this series goes and what figures are covered. So Gideon appears to us in the book of Judges, as I'd said, and primarily in the 6th chapter of the book of Judges in the Old Testament. I'm picking up on a few verses, so not really telling his whole story, but a little piece of it, beginning with verse 11 through verse 18, and then a couple of verses a little bit later on, verses 25 through 27. So I'm going to read these to you, and then I'm going to share a little bit about Gideon himself, give a little more background than you have in the scripture, but also really kind of what's highlighted here and why it's pertinent to our series. Now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the oak at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, and his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Gideon answered him, "But sir, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all his wonderful deeds that our ancestors recounted to us, saying, 'Did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt?' But now the Lord has cast us off and given us into the hand of Midian." Then the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in this might of yours and deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. I hereby commission you." Gideon responded, "But sir, how can I deliver Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." The Lord said to him, "But I will be with you, and you shall strike down the Midianites, every one of them." Then he said to him, If now I have found favor with you, then show me a sign that it is you who speak with me. Do not depart from here until I come to you and bring out my presents and set it before you." And he said, "I will stay until you return." Now we pick up with the 25th verse. That night the Lord said to him, "Take your father's bull, the second bull, 7 years old, and pull down the altar of Baal that belongs to your father, and cut down the sacred pole that is beside it, and build an altar to the Lord your God on the top of the stronghold here in proper order. Then take the second bull and offer it as a burnt offering with the wood of the sacred pole that you cut down." So Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as the Lord had told him. But because he was too afraid of his family and the townspeople to do it by day, he did it by night. All right, so as I said, this is not the full story of Gideon, but it certainly is the story of his beginning. And what we find in Gideon's beginning is someone who is hesitant and fearful and questioning. So a little bit of background here is we have a period of time represented by about 7 years that the Israelites have really been oppressed by the Midianites. They have had raids that have happened. They have been impoverished as a result of the power of the Midianites. And that has been what has been ongoing for some time. So when this angel of the Lord, and that's kind of used synonymous with the Lord, but now then the Lord turned to Gideon, it says in verse 14, but verse 12 says, "The angel of the Lord appeared to him," is whenever we see angel and then that interposed or used alongside of the word the Lord, an angel of the Lord is a mouthpiece of God. It's one that is a messenger of God. And so God and messenger kind of are synonymous in this case. So this visitor is a messenger from God, speaking God's words. Not dissimilar to the messengers that visited Abraham and delivered the news to Abraham that he would bear a child, for example. So there is evidence that we have in the biblical narrative for these messengers that speak God's word directly to people. Now, when this messenger appears, the messenger's greeting is, "The Lord is with you, you mighty warrior." And there is somewhat of irony in this statement, though it becomes true, because Gideon is at that point beating out wheat in a wine press, which essentially is beating out the wheat in a way that would not make it obvious to the Midianites so that they would then raid and take it. So naming him a mighty warrior in this is a juxtaposition against the fact that he's actually hiding his actions. There isn't really anything mighty in his actions. And Gideon responds to this, "The Lord is with you, you mighty warrior," with, "Oh, okay, sure, God is with me. If that's the case, then why for 7 years has this been happening? We heard how God was so active and involved in the past, but that's not the case now, as we've been oppressed for all this time." And then we get the response, "Well, it's your turn now. Go in this might of yours," so mighty warrior, "and deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. I hereby commission you." So here is Midian's call as he's still down in this winepress pit trying to hide his actions. Midian responds, "How? I am from the weakest clan in Manasseh," so we don't have a lot of people, and the Midianites were quite a large and formidable enemy, "and the least in my family." That would imply that he's the youngest in his family as well. And then we have the response, "Because I will be with you, and you will strike down the Midianites, every one of them." And so then we have Gideon respond, "Okay, if that's true, then show me a sign that it's you who speaks to me." And there is signs. There's 3 signs that follow. I didn't include that. I don't feel like that is relevant or important. And so I didn't include sort of the tests on God. Is we have Gideon, teetering on the edge of this commission and sort of needing that push over the edge to get him there. Then we have his first action. His first action is to begin to show his true commitment to God. And that's why I included verses 25 through 27. So this is to tear down these altars to pagan gods, to Baal, and this pole that is there. So the altar of Baal and the sacred pole, and to build an altar to God. And the significance of this passage, and part of the reason I included it, is Midian does this with 10 people. There is a sense that we do not go about our work ever alone, but we go into our work with close connections and ties and friendships that allow us to rise to our potential. So what starts out as hesitant and fearful becomes faithful, courageous, and reliant. And that reliance is not on Gideon's strength or his leadership, but on God's power. It is this reliance that makes Midian a mighty warrior, which is named by the messenger. And that sort of humbles him as well. We see a very humble leader who doesn't say, yeah, I'm so strong, I can do it, but one that doesn't believe that, more aware in some ways of his weakness than his strengths. Now, why for 7 years has this befallen the Israelite people? Well, the evidence of this is also in what Gideon goes to do as that first action, his commitment to God. The Israelites have turned away from God and God's ways. And so Gideon represents a turning back to God, and that God can accomplish if we admit and share our weaknesses. God can accomplish incredible things through us. Gideon is often considered the fifth and the greatest judge. They wanted to make Gideon a king after the victory over the Midianites. So there was a victory over the Midianites. I'm not even going to go into all of that. You can read that story. And Gideon says no, he will not take on that, which is why he is a judge. One of the prophets and judges over Israel is he doesn't want to be tempted. That is exactly what God has called him to do, is to be a faithful leader and a mighty warrior, not a ruler. And so Gideon will not take on that role. He remains humble in his faith and in his role. So that's what we have for Gideon this week. I'm obviously going to be sharing a lot more about Gideon and his story and looking at how that ties into our overall theme, but experiences that we ourselves have, or a sense of our own limitations, perhaps the hesitancies that we uplift relative to taking the actions that we know are right, or the fear that we have for doing or saying what we know is right. Gideon becomes a great example how faith in God and connection with a solid group of people, with friends, can help us to achieve the leadership and outcome that we know God is seeking for us in our lives and for our world. So as I said, 2 weeks, there won't be Exploring Sunday Scriptures. We'll be back on that final Tuesday in July, exploring the first scriptures of the first week of August. And so have a good time off. I hope you'll still be involved and connected into worship. And I look forward to being back with you when I pick up the series again with my preaching later on in July. God bless you. Take care.